Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about medical care across the Western world generally, but specifically in countries that have national health schemes. So we're talking like Australia, Britain, New Zealand, Canada, that sort of thing. This still applies to other countries such as the United States or Western countries, but not as much and in different ways. So I just want to talk generally about this. Now, I noticed that in some of the most built-up areas, population-intensive areas in Britain, where there's been huge, massive influxes of people that don't speak English, and all of whom seem to be in poor health and needing medical services. The British government, in their wisdom, have decided that all these people can get free medical care. No wonder they come streaming across the board. But anyway, to get medical care. So as a result, the British people and people I know are complaining that it can take 2 weeks to see what's called a GP, a general practitioner, like your local family doctor. So, and this has been put down to the overpopulation being, increasingly burdened by all these illegal people coming in and 20 Indians to a two-bedroom apartment type stuff going on, which happens here in Australia as well. When you've got a population of 1.3, 1.4 billion people just in India alone, then you add the other many hundreds of millions in the Pakistan and Bangladesh. You've got 2 billion plus people, and they're all living dirt poor existence, and they can't wait to get the fuck out of there and into the West and get their hands on all that free stuff. Gimme. So anyway, in Britain it's 2 weeks or so. Some of this has been exacerbated by COVID and the lockdowns, but this is also happening in all across the Western world with their national health services, national health schemes. So, and it's happening in Australia as well, even areas that have a very low migrant intake, areas that are still 95% white. It's still happening. So we're getting the same. It's a 2 to 3 week waiting time just to see a general practitioner. And again, in areas that are not subject to much migration, almost none. And it's 95% plus white. So nonetheless, there's an elderly relative that I take to the doctor and all that sort of thing. So getting an appointment for her, still it's a 2 to 3 week wait unless it's urgent. And if it's very urgent, they just say, well, go to the hospital, go to the emergency section of the hospital. And that's the only wait if you want sort of service that day. I mean, you might have to wait for hours in the emergency room. That's what the illegals and the recent arrivals do. They want to go to the top of the queue, and they know, they've been briefed on how to game and scam the system. So they just go straight to the emergency thing at the hospital. But otherwise, you've got to. But what they're doing now is they're saying, okay, well, it's a 2.5 week wait if you want to go and see the GP. You go, okay. But they say, we've got GPs in a medical centre. We've got GPs that are not part of the National Health Scheme. They kind of are. They're only half are. But if you want to see one of those within the next day or two, and you want to pay another $50, then you can see one of them. And you're invited, if not exhorted, to take that option. So this is going on all around, and I've noticed this pattern has been appearing. Now in Australia, there are sort of two systems running in parallel. There's the National Health Scheme, and then you've got a private health scheme that you can take if you want, say, choice of medical specialist or choice of doctor. If you don't, you've just got to take whoever comes. Now, it used to be a couple of years ago, you could just walk into the doctor, the medical centre, and maybe you have to wait for an hour or something like that. But that would be it. At the absolute busiest times, maybe more than an hour. But otherwise, someone's going to see you within 20 minutes typically, depending on what it is, if it's an uncomplicated sort of requirement. But those days are long gone. I don't think there's a medical centre in the country now you can just walk into. You have to book in advance. And again, these are areas that are nearly all white. And the outcome is the same in areas that are super intensive migrants where no one speaks English and that sort of thing. You still get that same 2 weeks wait, but if you want to see someone, you have to pay extra. You got all that sort of stuff there. Which is why, of course, they go to emergency departments. The people who are illiterate in their own language, let alone English. So now, what's happened is that medical centres around the world, and in Australia is no different, are being bought up by the big finance companies who are, really tightly in bed with big pharma. So we've got this situation where these medical centres are being bought up by big investment companies, big finance, and they want to squeeze it for all they can. Now, they want to milk the taxpayer dollars for as much as they can, but they also want to pull money out from other, bring revenues in from other sources. So, some white guy or white person gets on the phone who seems well-spoken. Oh, yeah. Well, so let's see if they want to cough $50 for a bit of extra service. And they're artificially denying white people or people they think can pay, artificially denying service. So it'll be 2 weeks. That's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. It's not a 2 week wait or 2.5 weeks. They're just trying to squeeze you for money. That's all it is. So now that's quite widespread now. And for people who are, say, on full pensions, they may get seen a little bit earlier, such as the elderly relative. But other than that, you've got to they're really pushing you to pay. Now the other thing too they're doing is do you want to see a doctor that speaks English? Like someone that's been trained in Australia and born in Australia. That's the thing. Do you want to see someone like well then we expect you to pay a bit more for that as well. So these are the scams that are going on, and again they're going all around the world. There's no reason why there should be exactly the same waiting list in a nearly 100% white area of say Sydney, as opposed to an area in London that's almost zero white and where no one speaks English. Yet it's the same waiting time to see a GP. Now that's not coincidence. That's planned. Part of this new world order, I would imagine. But the national health scheme and the idea of providing medical care to everybody is a noble, honourable one, and one I happen to agree with. But it involves rationing in ways like in say you want to in America, the rationing comes from who can afford to pay. So that creates a rationing all of its own. Somebody wants a heart surgery and they want the nation's leading heart surgeon to do it, baby, you pay. And there's a form of rationing in that. But there's rationing also in national health schemes. So say you want a minor, keyhole procedure for, I don't know, gallbladder or anything, it doesn't matter. It's a fairly minor procedure. Now, if you want to get it done, you've got to pay $10,000 to go to a private clinic with a renowned, well-known, clearly well-qualified specialist. But if you want to go through, say, the public hospital system, you have to wait. You have to go onto a waiting list where people, low-level administrators, based on a checklist, will put a value on you getting that service. Does someone need the service more than you do? Are you likely to benefit from the service? Are you overweight, or do you have other medical complications? Are you from a minority group? Are you a lesbian? And they go through this extensive checklist. And sorry, buddy, you're a straight white male, and we think you should pay anyway. You're going to push someone out who really can't afford it. You probably could if you made a bigger effort. So you're not going to get the service, and the black lesbian will. So those sort of things go on. But let's assume that you get your ass onto the operating table. Then there will be well qualified gallbladder or whatever it is specialists there. But when you turn up, because you're not paying the full tote, you're what's called a public patient, then the specialists will go off in the side room and have a cup of coffee, and they may hang around to sort of deal with an emergency if it occurs. But the trainees, yes, you heard it right, trainees come along and do it. And they're the ones who'll be doing your thing, and they're going to make a bit of a mess of it. Instead of needing 3 stitches at the end of it, you're probably going to need 10, and this. But at least you get. So you want to complain about it, buddy? Well, you're lucky it got done at all. So there's rationing that occurs and a much reduced service. So what we're going to see with the health dollar, all across the Western world, is under assault from 3 directions. One, masses of peasants who've never had access to healthcare in their lives, illiterate in their own language, they need interpreters. A consultation with some of these people, even with an interpreter, can take an hour, whereas white person talking to another white person, it could take 5 minutes for the same consultation. So huge investment in time to look after these people and give them free medical care. I mean, why the West is doing this to themselves is absolutely beyond me, but nonetheless, so there's less and less time. Also, there are more and more doctors. I mean, this is being purposefully done. They're simply not training white doctors. They're bringing doctors in and giving preference to black lesbian doctors, that sort of thing, which means you're getting a much lower quality. I mean, the difference in quality between an Australian trained native-born doctor and some of these other folks from Bangladesh and whatever, the difference is chalk and cheese. I mean, you're talking about these people from these third world countries. All they can do is run off a checklist. How the fuck they got qualified is beyond me. All they can do is go off a checklist. A patient comes in, check blood pressure, they just don't know what to do. They can anyone could run off a checklist like that, and so these people are effectively just checklist runner-offs. But also the role of the GP has changed. The GP used to be an analyst who would decide, this is the course of action we need to take. This is the treatment you need. This is the specialist you need to go to. Those days are gone. What the GP is really just a very low level quarterback or something. They're just, okay, blood test and get all these other tests done. They're just directing you out to do tests. Now, the cost of these tests is sometimes fairly high, but the idea of analysis and trying to find out what's wrong with somebody, that just doesn't happen now. With the better locally trained doctors, it still does, but with all the other ones, they just put you out for tests. Now, what happens here, I don't know whether there's a kickback arrangement between the people doing the testing and the specialist, the doctor. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't, but we don't know that for sure. So what happens is, say there's 10 tests to decide whether or not you've got heart problems and what those heart problems are, for example. So there's 10 tests. Now, they'll start you off at test number 1, even though it's obvious that test number 9 and 10 are the ones that are really going to nail it. But they've got so they put you through each test, and therefore, the first test is $1,000, second test costs $2,000, $3,000, and so on. Now, they have to do this in sequence. Again, it's coming back to the checklist thing. They have to do it in sequence, even though the earlier tests are irrelevant to determining what the causes of the health problem may be. But this is what the doctors do. So in treating of the elderly relative, I look, the problem is with the big toe, not with this other stuff. So those early tests, you don't need them. They're just going to take up a lot of time. You got to drive there. You got to wait. It's invariably late. By the time a test is done, you drive back. It's a 4-hour gig per test, and you got 10 of them to go through. You got to book them, and they change appointment times, all this sort of crap. So it's quite a labour-intensive thing to go to all these tests. Some of them may be 20 miles away for the testing. Go to the testing centre. So what they do though is they insist you have to go through the sequence. You have to go through the checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Even though it's obvious that step 9 or 8 or whatever is the one that's needed, you still have to go there, even though it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money. So it's become hugely test intensive, and not that that's a bad thing, but the tests themselves that they put you through are again on this checklist sequence. So most of them, 3/4 plus, 90% of them aren't needed. They're just there as sort of fillers and stuffers to make these testing companies rich without having to lift a commercial finger to achieve this outcome. So there's huge costs in there. And then we've got the pharmaceutical side of things where they're big pharma, where they're very keen to encourage situations and treatments where you're dependent on big pharma drugs for the rest of your life. And that could be anything from, I don't know, blood thinners or cholesterol control or this or that or the next thing, and to have you dependent on these drugs. So big pharma's chewing at one end with I believe over-servicing and over-provision of drugs. There's the testing regime on that side coming in there. There's the pressure on dollar. Then there's of course the all the migrants coming in that are disproportionately chewing up vast amounts. I went into a few years ago, I went into a hospital waiting room, and over half the people there couldn't speak a fucking word of English, like in the emergency room. And I mean, it shows, that it takes so long to look after these people and to find out even what the problem is. And they think they're entitled to this service. I'm here in this rich country and, I'm entitled to all this. So they want it all and they're getting all this attention and all these white people running around and they love it. And they're happy to string something out for hours. If other people have to wait, hey, who cares? So this is very much an issue. And this is why the medical system in the West is being assaulted so intensively from 3, if not 4 sides, because the amount of doctors that are around. I mean, you can go to the medical centres in Sydney where there may be, there are 10 doctors, only one of them is white. And they're just, the West is refusing to train quality white doctors, just refusing to do it. They're bringing in people from third world peasant places that really shouldn't even be junior nurses, let alone fucking doctors. So anyway, that's my view. You're being a Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.